Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies, your host. Good morning, Houston. Good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. Of course, good morning to every nook and cranny in Northeast Texas, Southeast Texas, Northwest Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, and every other nook and cranny receiving our 100,000 watt transmitter signal. Folks, we're going to have a great program for you. But of course, I should mention good morning to the entire world, because that magical thing called the internet connects us worldwide. Anyhow, we're going to have a great program. In case I'm not a little sharp enough this morning, I just looked at my Fitbit, and in the last 2 days, I only had about 6 hours. So sleep, that is. So no wonder. Anyway, before we get started, let's go ahead and get to the studio where we have our resident geniuses. Buenos dias, mis hermanos.
And good morning to you, and good morning to Nome, Alaska. Why the heck not? Everything is going good here. We've got the tin cans of string holding up for for almost a week now. And we're doing okay. And I have nothing for you, no rants, no anything, because I'm just too tired. My Fitbit would say, I hear
you, buddy.
My Fitbit would say, this man should be dead. By some miracle, he's not. And speaking of, let's go ahead and throw it to Jack for some wisdom, because boy, do we need some wisdom today.
Yes.
Oh, man, this sounds bad already.
Yeah, well, we're off to a crawling start here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, Egberto. How are you?
Good morning, Jack. Wake me up, Jack. Wake me up.
Okay. I read your letter this morning. Yes, a global tax on the rich would be a good idea. The citizens all pay their taxes. The rich need to take responsibility for their wealth and pay their fair share of taxes, plain and simple. When the wealthy are too wealthy, there is no incentive to consider the day-to-day struggles of the poor, the working poor, and the average family. When the wealthy don't pay their taxes, they're stealing your wealth.
Those bums.
Those Grinches.
Yeah.
Stingy Grinches.
Rats.
Stingy Grinches.
I tell you, it is interesting, because our tax system, our economic system, a lot of people act as if it's divine, like things are working the only way that they can work and the only way that they should work, etc., which is not the case. Our system was designed from its inception by a bunch of folks who, of course, when they designed it, made sure to keep their interests at hand. In other words, if you're going to design a system, you don't design a system for equity. You design a system that allows you to keep what you got and probably expand on what you got. That's what we have. Yesterday there was a caller. I don't remember. I think it is his name. A caller yesterday that as soon as I got off the show yesterday, I'm like, I hope he really calls back, because I want that conversation. I don't know if you remember this, Howard and Jack. Somebody called and said, when your show is a bit too early in the mornings, but when I'm listening to your show, Remember that?
Veteran Donald.
Veteran Donald, yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who called in.
Veteran Donald.
He says he uses Veteran Donald to differentiate him from the regular Donald.
Yes. And he said something that touched me. He said, when my heart rate is usually between 80 and 85, I was about to say, hey, man, we need to start spinning together to drop that baby to 60, but that's okay. He said 80, 85 is where his resting heart rate is. And then he starts to listen to Politics Done Right, and it goes up to 110, 115. And in my mind, I said, there are two things there. We're kind of giving him some exercise without having to go on the spinning machine. But the other thing is, why? And I really hope he's listening this morning, and I really hope that he calls back, because he said he had he had a whole lot of commentary that he wanted to give, and apparently he's been wanting to give some commentary for some time. And that's what we're here for. This is your program, Veteran Donald. I want to hear from you, because you really piqued my interest. I really want to hear what you have to say or what you want to put out there. But anyhow, the title of today's show is Bernie and Omar Support Global Tax on the Rich. Then Evangelical Church cancels journalist member. And I want to start with the Bernie and Omar article. Last night, by the way, I'm heading out to, Baltimore in about a month. What's today's date? The 12th. I think I head out either on the 10th or the 11th to Baltimore, where we're having Netroots Nation, which is the largest gathering of progressive bloggers, writers, and all in one. I don't know if you remember, Howard, last year we did it, and we actually did Politics Done Right from the hotel room. We're connected to the studio, and we're still able to do it in the morning. It was on Central Time then, but we're going to be doing Baltimore on the East Coast. But we're going to be talking to a whole lot of, all the politicians and all those guys go out there and they try to talk to folks to make sure they get themselves coverage in every media, small media, large media, and all that good stuff. So they'll be out there. And so we're preparing to make sure, because I'm probably going to interview between 40 and 50 people at least out there. And there's a whole lot of preparation to get into that, just so that things move smoothly. But one of the things we're going to find out this time around is where the pulse of America really is. Again, these are people from every nook and cranny, small city, small town, everything. And my contention is, I don't think we're getting a true picture of where Americans are. I honestly don't think so. Because when I speak to people, I hear, again, yes, there's polarization. Yes, there's all of that. But when we start talking about policy and topics, people generally agree on most things. You throw abortion in there, you throw gasoline on a whole lot of lit lots. But if you start talking economics, you find out that most people kind of believe the same things, especially when kind of coaxed into the context. And that's what I want to do this morning, coax into the context. Our economic system is not divine. In other words, it wasn't God or if you believe in God, God didn't put it here. If you believe in some supreme being, that supreme being didn't put it there. A whole bunch of people, some, leaders in some countries decided how it's going to operate. We get a, monetary exchange system and all these things that were in our several last 100 years created by, Western countries, but it has always been there. There's always been Mesopotamia. There's always been the Ottoman Empire, and all these different folks had their own systems that, worked, didn't work, etc. But we've had a long-standing system with the Industrial Revolution. And look, I'm not a historian or an expert in all of that, but all of us have the ability to see how things are working if we choose to do so. So we have a particular type of economic system that we run by. And this economic system right now is not working for most. And we have a tendency to put these kinds of blames on a politician or something like that. In this case, Biden is in power and we throw it on to Biden. The reason why we're having such economic situation. And the truth of the matter, it is never the case. The case is always those who control capital, who have power, are the ones who have constantly done and created policies that keep them in power. Everybody does that. People say, well, that's human nature. Yeah, that's human nature. But human nature as well is that most people are not greedy. I don't know for anybody who watched the movie Wall Street back in I think it was back in the 90s, early 90s or late 80s. Remember Gecko? Gecko came out and says, greed is good. And they gave you the impression that everybody's greedy and that because everybody's greedy, that's the reason why you needed a capitalist system, because the capitalist system doesn't have heart. But what it does have is the ability for greed to reign, right? It's always about maximizing the dollar, making as much money as you can. And if you don't do it, somebody else will, etc. And that greed is what drives us. And it's easy to disprove that, right? It's easy to prove, first of all, that that's a lie, though we all say it and believe it. Greed is good. Greed is what makes things go around, etc. If that were the case, think about this. We wouldn't. The vast majority of the people in the world, and let's just use America as a whole, the vast majority of Americans won't allow 1% of Americans to screw them, because in their greed, they would not allow others to be more greedy than they are, or that they could, or that they would. Most people just want to go to work. They get up in the morning. They want to go to work, be able to pay their bills and live a life. Most people want to have either a family life or a party life or whatever. They just want to make enough to survive. Greedy, they're not. Greedy are the psychopaths, however. Greedy are the psychopaths who eventually also control the system via their greed. And given that all of us just want a job, or when I say a job, whether it's one that we create ourselves or whether it's one working for somebody else. So in order for us to be able to change things, if we want to change things, we have to first stop believing the nuttiness, the silliness, that which is imposed on us as fact or somehow truly believe. No, most people are not greedy. Most people are not cutthroat. Most people, in fact, are good. Many of the folks, however, that walk on top of others to make it, no matter what, those are psychopaths. So what you find, and I hate to put it this way, but that person who is running away from taxes, that person who has $1 billion and is going to go back and support politicians who tell them, I'm not going to allow you, I'm not only going to allow you to hold on to those billions that you really didn't earn, but I'm also going to ensure that you don't have to put back some of those billions in the form of taxes. And those billionaires who support you then, so it shows the psychopathy. It shows the psychopathy of what I'm talking about. Because I'm going to use myself, yours truly. If I were ever to get $1 billion, well, I couldn't get $1 billion because the truth of the matter is, as I started accumulating wealth, I would be throwing it out the door probably as fast as I'm getting it. Again, I am like most people, human. I'm like most people, just want to survive comfortably, but don't worship the mighty dollar proper, the wealth proper. I want to give back. The thing about it is also, I could not possibly, with my knowledge, with my work, with the things that I do, there is not a possibility for me to be a billionaire without having walked over, harm someone else, whether directly or indirectly, because my worth does not afford me the possibility to make that kind of money. An economic system, let me give an example now. If I had bought Tesla, Elon Musk's company that really didn't make him a billionaire, that he had to walk over others to make it. If I had bought that stock, I could have sat in my home and turned, let's say, $100,000 into, let's say, several million. Let's just, for argument's sake, say $1 billion. And one would say, well, look, you became rich and you didn't harm anybody to do it. You made a wise investment. To which I would say, yes, I made a wise investment. But to say that in my wise investment, I hadn't harmed anybody forgets that. Let's go ahead and use the having bought Tesla as an example. I haven't harmed anybody directly, but there's something called abstraction, which is what capitalism is what it perfectly does. Abstraction means this. I have designed a system where I can profit, get very wealthy without directly harming anyone, but the institution itself that have afforded me the ability to be rich harmed a whole many. Let's go to the electric car or to Tesla or whatever. For me to have been able to build, or for Tesla to have been able to build that car, there are a lot of natural resources that were acquired throughout the world where, one, people died to acquire it, children doing slave labor for rare materials, and many other systemic things of that nature. People working in some parts of the country producing certain types of things that harm themselves, that cause them ill, etc. So I got rich because the Tesla executives were able to get the working of executives in Pakistan, executives in Afghanistan, executives in Peru, executives in Ecuador, and all these places where all these different types of material come from. And by the way, I'm random using countries where they export some sort of material where people harm themselves and get in the materials for which we build things, for which the stockholder of these companies have enriched themselves and abstractly not harmed anybody, but abstractly do so. And then at the same time, having raised the billion from that big stock investment or whatever, where I've harmed nobody directly, when it is time to say, now I should want to pay a tax, I try to find every mechanism possible not to pay the tax, but to hold on to that wealth created by the design of an economic system that, yes, harm others, but abstractly hides the way in which it does so. Again, it's a matter of narrative and how the story is told. And we are told a story about how an economic system runs and why interest rates are high or low or where inflation comes from or not. And we sit down and we watch MSNBC, NBC, CBS, CNBC, and all these stations singing the same narrative. And we sit down and just play our part in the game and believe all that we hear. And anybody that disagrees, we have another group of folks who make it seem from the writings that they do that you are the one that something is wrong with you. You are the darn communist. You are the damn socialist. You are all these things that they make into a negative to ensure that this system that is designed for the psychopaths to succeed are fine. Now, I'm not talking about that baker who's a millionaire, because they created a nice tasting bread that a lot of people like, and that they ultimately buy in and become rich. And when rich is relative, that millionaire, that's not who I'm talking about. Oh, that guy, that person is fine. If you work hard as hell, you deserve to make more than somebody who isn't working as hard. But after you have reached a certain amount of wealth, capital, etc., you are not doing it on your own. That wealthy baker eventually, yes, it's his flavor or her flavor and her magical way of using yeast and all of that. But eventually, as she grows, she's bringing in more people that are actually a part of making that. That if the economic model doesn't force a sharing because, I did that, I invented that, something is wrong. So when Sanders and Omar is leading, that is Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar, as this article points out, they're leading the drive to have a global tax, because what else the wealthy does is they take their monies and they hide it into places like the Caribbean, where affords them a zero tax rate just to hold their money at some fixed cost or whatever. We have to create an international mechanism so that those who have made their money on the backs of others, and that is every super wealthy person on this planet, doesn't get a chance to play country number one against country number two. It is so very important. All right. End of that first rant. 713-526-5738 is the number. The article is listed in the newsletter. It's titled Sanders Omar Lead Call for Biden to Back Global Tax on the Rich. And that is what cued my rant of the morning. 713-526-5738 is the number. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I'd love to hear from our new brother, veteran Donald, to tell me if I was able to successfully raise his heart rate up this morning again. Let's go to Brother Harry.
Buenos dias, hermano el profesor, brother from another mother, Egberto Willies. This is
Buenos dias, senor. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, this is why I love this show. As I was just telling Magic Jack there, because Jack Van Dever, Howard Reynolds, and Egberto Willies make us think. And these new guys on this Q Talk, they're doing a good job. I believe it's Mike and John. They're making us think as well. And one of my favorite callers that calls your show, Egberto, we haven't heard from him in a while. I hope he's listening this morning. But I love it when he talks to you. His name is Dr. John. Dr. John.
Yes, I love Dr. John.
Yes, Dr. John should prescribe politics done right, because Egberto Willies makes you think. He gets, when you started talking about this, Egberto, I got all these thoughts just running through my head. As soon as you started opening your mouth, talking about capitalism and all that. That's why it's important to listen to this show, because you break this stuff down. And it also makes me think of some of the talks that I had with Harry Dunson Sr., my dad, learning about capitalism when he was alive. And of course, with my brother Alan, when we talk about these things, it makes us think. That's why I love this show. And one of the things, and I'm going to compliment you, Egberto, one of the final things that Steve Hunter said to me when Steve Hunter had you talk, he said, I think it was during Fund Drive, he said, Harry, Egberto Willies has really made a difference in your life. And, I just thank God that Egberto Willies came into my life. And even before I used to like the way you used to put it when your show used to come on at noon, when you would talk about on Mondays and Wednesdays, on Fridays at noon, all Central Time. I used to love when you would talk like that. And I tried to get on your show then, but it was harder to get on then. And then when it got moved, when you took over Tom Hartman's slot and it got moved, then, here we are. When you got, I think it was like May of last year when you got moved in that new time slot. But anyway, you're talking about, and he just died about a month ago. When you were talking about Gordon Gekko. It was 1987. Wall Street came out, and the great director Oliver Stone, because his father worked in Wall Street, and that inspired him to make that movie. And let's see, greed is right, greed works, greed is good. You know, the great that crook who violated the SEC rules, Ivan Boesky. He was 87. He died.
I remember him.
Yes, he died. I think in early May or late April. They were talking about him. And then I heard this other show on NPR. They were talking about 401ks and the guy who created them. And they're talking, because it used to be they were talking about how when people worked for a company for a long time, and maybe it was Ford Motor Company or it was General Motors, people used to pay into the company when they would retire, because like you said, people want enough money, they want to pay their bills, and they want to build a nest egg and be able to enjoy retirement. The company used to pay into the retirement. And then the 401ks, when they came out with that, well, you're at the mercy of the shareholders and the stockholders, because you can lose money when the stocks go down. And it's not guaranteed money that you were getting when you when they used to pay into the company. And I think Washington is working on something. I heard something on there. They were talking about they want to get back to something like that, because a lot of 401ks aren't working out for a lot of people.
Let me just bring that up, because that's an important thing. A lot of people, I think, remember, if the executives of a corporation do something for changing pension programs, etc., remember that it is never the employee they're doing it for. Yeah, I mean, people have to understand this. There are certain concepts that I find that just shows that we're not greedy. We're more gullible than anything else. Whenever an executive of a corporation makes any moves, and if it's a move they have to try to sell to employees, remember, it is never a move. And before I continue, welcome aboard Billy Allison Irwood on the chat. Welcome aboard Eric Hayes on the chat. I've got to talk to you about something you just mentioned in the chat in a little bit. And welcome aboard El Peluco XD as well to the program. Now, remember this: no executive of any corporation in today's world, whenever they're making any change to a retirement program, to a stock kind of a program where employees are able to participate in some sort of a stock program, it is never for the benefit of the employee. As soon as you start believing that, you've been caught. Remember this: they went from defined pension programs to 401k to put the responsibility of your retirement solely on you, as opposed to a defined benefit where the corporation says you have given to this corporation, and therefore this corporation owes you till death for having made us whole. They've changed the paradigm. And you mentioned something important when you say with 401ks, your life goes up and down with whatever stock you choose for the 401k, etc. And it absolves the company from any kind of responsibility to you. So when they give stock options where you can buy into the company, people think like, oh, that's a great thing. What the company is buying is a steady stream of people buying the stock, and thus on Wall Street maintaining a certain, helping to maintain the appreciation of said stock. It is never, ever for you. And once you get into the mental thinking that executives, as Milton Friedman, the current, the last, what I call the last daddy of capitalism, not free enterprise, capitalism. That daddy said the responsibility of the executive is not to society. It is solely for the benefit of the shareholder. And by shareholder, of course, they mean the ones who own the most shares in a company. Continue, Harris. I got a video to play, but continue and
I'll finish up. I also was listening on NPR when they were talking about the evangelicals and how this woman and his wife and the husband. It was a Baptist church, and I think other Baptist churches. And when I was at my worship service last night, I was told the pastor about this as well, because it made me think of the previous pastor we used to have at the Seventh-day Adventist Lutheran Church. We had two pastors. We had a Pastor Jones and a Pastor Moda, and they were talking. And on this thing, they were talking about how they don't want in these Baptist churches. They don't want women pastors, and I just felt that that's discrimination. And I'm glad that man and that woman decided to get off the list to try to get this woman pastor removed, and they're leaving that church because they're discriminating against women. And I was telling the pastor that, and the pastor was telling me, well, Harry, thank God the Seventh-day Adventist doesn't have that. And I said, well, we just need to pray, Pastor, that gets stopped, because they shouldn't be discriminating against women like that. And then I'll also say this. You sound like Stephanie Miller, you sound like Ed Schultz, and you sound like Randy Rhodes, and I'll use Jack Van Dever's line about privatize the profits, socialize the costs, and then like you were talking about when you were breaking down the capitalism, the shareholders, the stockholders, they didn't do any of the work, and the poor employee, it's the executors ripping off the poor and exploiting the poor and keeping more.
All right, gotcha. Good. You ended with a rhyme, so we're going to edit right there. Thank you, brother Harry. Have a good one. All right, folks. The second topic again, and is about. Well, I'll just go ahead and play it and let you guys hear what it has to be. Opinion columnist David French from the New York Times, and he worked before at Conservative Rags. He got a rude awakening from his evangelical church. They canceled him. Why did they cancel him? Because he had the nerve to speak some truths about Donald Trump. Truths that they all need to hear. But when you are of a belief that somehow your chosen one is somebody as flawed as Donald Trump, and you have to make sure to not say anything to reveal the truth about him, this is what you get. This was a long interview that was done on MSNBC with, but I tell you what, I cut it to get the full essence of it. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side. Critique it, because I think they did a great job in giving him the platform to tell a truth that many other media is not given enough of a platform to do so. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
And the decision to not support Donald Trump for president that has left some Americans feeling alienated by their churches. New York Times opinion columnist David French has a new piece out entitled "The Day My Old Church Canceled Me Was a Very Sad Day." And in it, he writes this: "This week, the leaders of the Presbyterian Church in America will gather in Richmond, Virginia for their annual General Assembly. The Presbyterian Church in America is a small, theologically conservative Christian denomination that was my family's church home for more than 15 years. It just canceled me. I am now deemed too divisive to speak to a gathering of Christians who share my faith." Two things happened that changed our lives, however, and in hindsight, they're related. First, in 2010, we adopted a 2-year-old girl from Ethiopia. Second, in 2015, Donald Trump announced his presidential campaign. I was a senior writer for National Review at the time, and when I wrote pieces critical of Trump, members of the alt-right pounced, and they attacked us through our daughter. We turned to our church for support and comfort. Our pastors and close friends came to our aid, but support was hardly universal. The church as a whole did not respond the way it did when I deployed. Instead, we began encountering racism and hatred up close from people in our church and in our church school. And David French joins us now. David, your church, what are the values it's based on? Can we refresh our memory?
Yeah. I tell you what, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen political divisions in church where, there are Republicans and Democrats, and I had spent, much of my life worshiping alongside Democrats. And when I came out against Donald Trump all the way back in 2015, I knew there would be some disagreement. I did not expect anything like we encountered. Now, look, our pastors, our close friends, they were not tolerating any of that racism or political intolerance. But it became part of the constant drumbeat of our lives. You could not any longer go to church and assume you weren't going to be confronted by someone angry. And then my daughter encountering and my kids encountering this incredible up close and personal racism at the school attached to our church. It just became incredibly difficult to sustain living in that environment. Again, there were many people who were great, but this combination of the devotion to Trump combined with the unearthing of a lot of the racism that was already in the denomination, but had been given new life in this moment, made it just unsustainable to stay. And then, we saw the denomination invite me back to speak to share how we responded to some of these really, really polarized moments. And then the far right attacked, and within days I was canceled.
But David, the question that I had when I read your article, do you think it's that there are some that have joined this cult-like following around Donald Trump, that religion gets mixed up with what is cult, and that they really don't see the difference? They brought into this cult the feeling that they are righteous and doing what is God's will, when it's in fact a cult that has very little to do with biblical grounding or morality.
Well, there's two things happening at once. On the one hand, you have a bunch of people in the church who literally believe that God chose Trump for this moment to save America. They will say he's God's very unlikely vessel for saving America. So if you're opposing Trump, you're opposing the chosen one. And then the other thing that happens is they exaggerate all of the darkness of the other side. So what they then say is, look, Trump is the chosen one. And then the other side, the Democrats, are just pure evil. And so you even have in many churches a bunch of people who will say, you just cannot be Christian and Democratic. You can't be Christian and a Democrat at the same time. It's just not possible. And so that exerts an incredibly powerful pressure on people in the church, because there's Donald Trump, the chosen one, against this other side that's allegedly so bad you can't even be Christian and support it. And so you begin to see the social pressure that is put on people to conform, and why when somebody dissents and they say, no, I don't agree that a three-time married adulterous guy who was just convicted of crimes related to paying hush money to a porn star is God's chosen one to save America. When you don't agree with that, you're actually seen as an enemy of God. You're seen as an enemy of the United States at the same time. And that social pressure is just extraordinary. But what's even sadder is that Trump, who has this giant Christian base, a giant segment of the American church is backing him, and he has no power unless they back him. What's particularly sad is you're talking about how this whole concept of repentance, that is so fundamental to the Christian faith. It's absolutely fundamental.
So fundamental.
But they still think he's the chosen one, even though, let's just go through some of the recent lists from the last year. He's been found responsible for sexual abuse. He's been found liable for defaming a victim of sexual abuse. He's been found responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fraud. He's been convicted of a crime that, even though I think there are some weaknesses in the legal side of the case, the factual side, the facts, it's overwhelming that he's did what he was accused of doing. And he's unrepentant about all of it. And if anything, the evangelical church is more a pillar of his power now than it was even a few years ago. He won the Republican primary on the strength of overwhelming evangelical support. And this is something, again, the social pressure is huge. He's God's chosen one. He's God's chosen one. It's relentless, this sort of argument. And if you dissent, yeah, there will be people in the church who still love you and support you and respect you, but there will be people who come after you.
So absolutely, yes. David French and his kids and his wife went through hell in the church because unfortunately, the church did not want to hear the truth. They wanted to put their heads in the sand and believe that Donald Trump was the chosen one, the one God ordained to bring the country forward. Why would God ordain such a character, such an immoral character? Why would God ordain someone that his pew, that children in that church would look at and say, Mom, Dad, I thought you told us that we shouldn't lie. Mom and Dad, I thought you told us that we shouldn't fornicate. Mom and Dad, I thought you told us that we should always be fair with others, treat everyone with respect. Mom and Dad, I thought you told us not to be evil. And everything that these churches preach, Donald Trump is anathema to it. Yet, these are folks that will continue to support him. Leadership is important. Dictatorship is what we have in churches. They call it the pastor, but we all know that the pastor have near omnipotent power with his pew. That's why Donald Trump and many others like to work through the domain of the churches, because the church ain't no democracy. The church is a patriarchal animal that many times you can tell the pew, because just being in the church means that you're willing to subject yourself to a certain form of indoctrination, a certain form of control, and that is used against the pew. Unfortunately, that's what's used against the pew. So here we go. Donald Trump, his biggest support base, the Evangelical Church, and they excommunicate all those that attempt to tell a bit of the truth. And you see all the politicians jumping back to Trump no matter what they've said before. And that is because the church, the omnipotent church, is what is the base, the driving base for Donald Trump, the alt-right and the Evangelical Church. And he thinks he can ride that wave. That is not a winning wave. The Democrats, if they do what's right, if they play their cards right, if they go into every corner of this country, landslide. And I still believe that I still have enough faith in the American population to realize that I think people are eventually going to open their eyes. And one may call that naive or wishful thinking. I don't think it is. Brian, come on in. Line numero uno. Come on in, my brother Brian.
Good morning. Okay, we talked a little bit about the tax break for the lower 10% population of the United States.
Yes.
The tax rate?
Yes.
Most people in the United States pay less than 10% tax on their income.
True.
Okay. Now, what Trump is proposing, and he'll do it, is hospitality workers such as tipped waitresses, waiters, hotel workers. Their tax money is no longer taxed, and this is an outstanding idea for the majority of people that do that job. Most of them are semi-skilled, just out of high school. That's the only job that they can get. That's a job that they like. And if you pay a tip with the credit card, that becomes a taxable income for them. Now, the other thing about the credit card is that becomes a cash advance. And the credit card company charges you a different rate about a day after your actual statement goes in. So that tax, the advance, you don't see it on your credit card if you pay your credit card off every month. My wife is very, very good at this. She found that out. We tipped someone, and then 1 month later, we get a bill for like 26 cents. The next month, it's still on there, except it's 28 cents. And she called and found that information out. So if you're going to tip someone, don't use your credit card. And thank your waiter.
Okay, now thank you for that, Brian. But first of all, I take exception to your statement that says Trump said he's going to tip workers. He's going to make sure that tips aren't taxed. Okay, if you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. But even if that's the case, I've made you talk, Brian. Please let me speak. Even if that is the case, let's say he goes through with that. That isn't the solution to our taxing problem. The solution to our taxing problem is really not the people at the low end who pay 10% of taxes, because if you want to know what really hurt those people are taxes that are called regressive taxes. In other words, if I pay a sales tax of 8%, I pay that whether I am rich, poor, or whatever. If I pay certain fees, I pay the same as a billionaire, no matter what. Those are the kind of systemic things that people need to think about and not think. I don't want us. We always think so little about ourselves. And I tell this to you respectfully. That is a pittance what he's doing for that wage, that tip worker. Let me give you a better social program for that tip worker, as opposed to telling that tip worker, I am not going to charge you taxes on the tips that you get. What about saying we have something called a basic income? And basic income means the following. In a society where we all work, nobody should have to suffer and be hungry. In a society where there are restaurants making money on your back, why should I not ensure that that our society is structured in a manner that if you're going out there and working your butt off, you are ensured not to suffer? Look, the phone lines are filled up, Brother Brian, and I did give you your whole platform to say what you needed to say, so I have to move on, my brother. Call me tomorrow.
It's a consumption tax that you're talking about, not an income tax. There's a difference between.
It doesn't matter. Wait. We only call tax. We are the ones who define what kind of taxes we charge, and then we are taught to believe that certain things fall into different region. A tax is a tax is a tax. It's either regressive or progressive. I believe things should always be progressive. I got to move on to Patrick. Thank you, my dear brother Brian. Patrick, come on in.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I'll touch on the tipping really fast. If somebody was actually interested in helping out service employees, they would increase the minimum wage that they get on a paycheck from $2.13 an hour up to $10 or $15 an hour, instead of trying to starve the government from income. So the fact that the minimum wage for wait staff hasn't changed above the half minimum wage that was set in 1980 shows you quite a bit. And the whole tipping concept is another diversion of money towards a business owner. What we're doing is a business owner is getting you to subsidize their staff so they can pay them less. They don't even make enough money on a paycheck to cover taxes. So don't tell me about how someone's trying to help them out by starving the government of income. But that's not why I called. What I'd like to touch on is I keep hearing this nonsense about Trump being less of a threat for war, that he hasn't started any wars. The whole issue between him and Zelensky and his relationship with Putin gave him the thumbs up to start making a move on Ukraine. And Putin thought that he was going to have two terms and that he was going to roll over that country without any issues at all. Next, Trump hasn't said anything about ending a war with a ceasefire or anything that I'm aware of. On top of that, I'd like to ask, even though I don't like this president, he ended the longest and most expensive war in the United States. And then also,
you're right.
He's not using thermonuclear war as a casual threat. That was what Trump did. No person on this planet has done that until Trump. So I don't want to.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I got it.
The peaceful president.
Patrick, I think I gave you a lot of time. Thank you for that. And by the way, I agree with most of what you had to say. So thank you very much, brother Patrick. I got to go to Joe. Come on in, Joe. You don't have a lot of time because we're running low. Come on in, Joe.
Hey, good morning. Man, a couple of observations this morning. Like David French he's not this babe in the woods that he's pretending to be. The guy he was a political journalist, right? And the political landscape shifted on him, and the whole thing went left. And he found himself, probably, his people probably did look at him and say, you know what? You are unacceptable, right? The things that you support are unacceptable. The politicians you support are unacceptable. I mean, he's a columnist for the Atlantic and the New York Times, and I don't really feel sorry for him. But the taxation deal, it's just a lot of what you talk about sounds like communism, like a global tax. This new global tax, and I love Bernie. But I've supported Bernie in the past. He's got some great ideas. Other things that I have serious problems with. But so this global tax you're talking about, for where do you draw the line? That's the devil's in the details, right? This is like
hold on a second. And since we don't have hold on, Joe.
Sounds like
Joe, I gotta go.
What?
Joe,
you gotta go.
Joe, because I only have 3 minutes and 3 more people to speak. So anyway, Joe, let me tell you this, okay? I will talk about this tomorrow, but I'm talking about the tax. Just jump into communism is a bad thing. So, I mean, that's not a good argument. But we'll talk tomorrow. Let's go to Johnny. Come on in, Johnny. You got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I got about. Okay. Hey, Joe, you're running low. You got to go. Speaking of which, don't forget, it was the religious types back in the 15th century that was responsible for suppressing the teaching of literacy to the serfs. Remember, the monks, they could read and write, but not you and me. And they were the same ones that were telling us there was a white guy up in the sky who's all-knowing and all-seeing, just like Santa Claus up in the North Pole. They engage in fantasy, not reality. They don't want scientists to tell you that the sun was at the center, and they put people in prison for it. They ran the government, and look what happened. And now they want to be in charge of the government again. Oh, God help us all. Oh, no.
Johnny, thank you so kindly for that, brother. I got to go to Bill. Come on in, Bill.
Hi there. I got to push back on the taxing the tips. It's not what someone says, but what someone has done. And the Trump administration back in 2017, their Labor Department considered taking the tips from the people who earned them, distributing them across their entire workforce, and once the level reached regular minimum wage, the corporation or the company could keep those tips. That's an easy look up on the internet, and I'm really surprised that people have no memory of what happened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much for that. Let me just tell you, that is something I have to look up myself because I didn't know. Thank you for bringing that information. Like I tell you, we all learn together in these programs, and we don't all have all the information or answers. I'm going to go look that up and see exactly, put that in a blog or something. Anyway, folks, before I finish here, let me jump to the studio, and I have a few words to say at the end. Studio.
Studio is here, and I have nothing for you except that, I can't see how in the world how anybody can support Donald Trump. That's just, to me, that's a mystery. And Jack, what you got? Are you mysterious too here?
No, I just was really enjoying what Patrick, Johnny, and Bill had to share with their comments.
Yep. All right. Okay. Back to you, sir.
All right. Let me just say this stuff. I'm looking at the chat with some of the mentions, and whenever I see some of the wordiology coming out of Eric about overspending and all of that, the government overspending and these type of issues, what makes me do this program day in and day out is the amount of learning that I realize we all have to do. The amount of misinformation that we have allowed ourselves to hold on to, and it is absolutely everything that has caused the current economic system to continue to do what it does to us all. So I'm going to tell you, folks, if you're a listener of Politics Done Right, I don't care from what ideology or whatever. I want you to continue listening, continue participating, and also encourage others to come out here where we can really have honest discussions and people can lay things out. And as you lay things out, can be critiqued. And I ask people also, like I will always maintain a thick skin, because we have been so corrupted by our media. We have been so corrupted by the Powell memo. We have been so corrupted in our thinking process by an ideology to support a very select few, the wealthy, a very select few. We have been indoctrinated. And one who is indoctrinated most of the times don't realize it till they snap out of the stupor. So again, I ask you to keep coming, keep listening, keep participating, keep writing me those emails as well, because out of all of that, we can get better. I want to thank Howard and Jack in the studio for the great work, support, and everything else they provide to KPFT. I want to thank all you listeners, all you callers. I genuinely, from the depths of my heart, love you all. Let's make this a better place. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willies.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.